The courtroom was supposed to be ordinary that morning. Just another case, just another set of arguments. But then, in the middle of a tense exchange, the judge leaned forward, cut off the lawyer mid-sentence, and said something that left the entire room in stunned silence. This was no ordinary interruption. It was the moment that shook the very foundation of the trial. The case had already been heating up for days. Reporters filled the press benches, their pens ready, cameras poised just outside the chamber doors. The gallery was packed with spectators who had been waiting weeks to see how this legal drama would unfold. At the center of it all, a young defense attorney, sharp, relentless, and unafraid to take risks. Across the aisle, the prosecutor seasoned, confident, a veteran who knew the system inside out. And presiding above them both, the judge, a man known for discipline, sternness, and absolute control. At first, the proceedings ran like clockwork. Objections, rulings, back and forth, all standard fare for a courtroom drama. But as the defense attorney began to mount his case, tension started to creep in. He was poking at weaknesses in the prosecution's arguments, exposing cracks with surgical precision. The prosecutor bristled, objecting at every turn. Speculation, irrelevant, leading, the judge sustained some, overruled others. But underneath the surface, something else was happening. The courtroom balance of power was shifting. The defense attorney was growing stronger, and the prosecutor was growing desperate. And that's when the moment came. The defense attorney, standing tall, began to outline a timeline that threatened to dismantle the entire case. His words were sharp, his delivery confident. The jury leaned in, the gallery fell silent. You could almost hear hearts beating, but suddenly the judge raised his hand. "Counsel," he said, cutting off the lawyer mid-sentence. "You need to stop right there." The lawyer froze. The jury exchanged glances. The gallery gasped. This wasn't just a procedural interruption, it was something else. The judge leaned forward, eyes locked on the attorney. And then he said it. "You are walking a dangerous line, counselor. One more step, and this court will hold you in contempt." The silence that followed was deafening. Gasps rippled through the room. The lawyer stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, his momentum ripped away in a single stroke. The jury looked unsettled, the prosecutor smirked, and the judge's voice echoed in every corner of the chamber. But here's the commentary that matters. Authority in a courtroom is like glass, strong when intact but fragile if cracked. The judge's interruption was not just a ruling, it was a warning. And warnings, when given in anger, reveal more than they conceal. The defense attorney lowered his eyes, adjusted his papers, and took a slow breath. The moment seemed to hang in the air like a storm cloud. And just when everyone thought he might retreat, he did the opposite. With a calm, steady tone, he said, "Your Honor, I mean no disrespect. But the truth is not always comfortable. And if speaking the truth tests the limits of this courtroom, then perhaps it is the courtroom, not the truth, that must bend." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, even a stifled cheer from the back of the gallery. The prosecutor jumped to his feet. "Objection! Out of line!" But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. The gallery had heard it. And soon the entire nation would hear it too. This is where the story truly begins. Because what you just witnessed was not merely an exchange of words, it was a power struggle. A judge trying to preserve order, a lawyer daring to challenge it, and a jury caught in the middle. The interruption was shocking, yes. But what followed, the fallout, the backlash, the viral storm, would prove even more shocking than the words themselves. And the question hanging over everyone now was simple. Would the lawyer's defiance cost him his case, or would it turn him into a hero? But if you thought the judge's warning was the peak of this drama, think again. Because what happened in the next exchange would not just rattle the courtroom, it would shake the very system itself. The courtroom didn't breathe for several seconds after the lawyer's daring words. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp and commanding, but it did nothing to erase what had already been spoken. The lawyer's defiance was hanging in the air like a thunderclap, unforgettable, unshakable. The prosecutor smirked, clearly convinced the judge had just handed him the upper hand. But if he thought this was victory, he was wrong, because the defense attorney wasn't rattled. In fact, he was calmer than ever. That calmness carried a message to everyone watching. He knew something they didn't. The jury noticed. Their eyes, which moments ago had been drifting toward the judge's stern command, were now locked on the lawyer. His voice had been steady, but his words had been piercing. And in a courtroom, steady confidence is more powerful than 100 objections. The prosecutor sprang forward, eager to capitalize. "Your Honor, this defense counsel is clearly out of line," he declared, his voice trembling slightly, despite his confidence. "He is disrespecting this court and undermining the authority of this institution." The judge raised a hand to silence him. For a split second, the prosecutor froze, realizing he too could be cut down by the same stern authority. That moment of hesitation, small as it was, shifted the energy back to the lawyer. The defense attorney adjusted his tie, glanced at the jury, and spoke again. "With respect, Your Honor, I ask only this. Should the truth be silenced because it makes someone uncomfortable?" The gallery erupted, murmurs swirled, whispers flew. Even the bailiffs looked uneasy, their eyes darting between the judge and the attorney. And here is the commentary you find in the official transcript. This was no longer about evidence or timelines or even the case itself. This was about principle, a clash of authority and accountability. The judge's warning was meant to shut the lawyer down, but instead, it lit a fire that everyone in the room could feel. The judge leaned back, visibly irritated. His voice was low, but heavy with warning. "Counsel, this court will not allow grandstanding. Stick to the facts or face the consequences." The defense attorney did not flinch. He nodded slowly, but in his eyes there was something unyielding. And when he turned back to the jury, he delivered a line that changed everything. "Then let us stick to the facts that the prosecution has tried so hard to bury." Gasps again. A wave of shock pulsed through the room. Even the court reporter, usually expressionless, paused in her typing for half a second. Everyone understood the weight of those words. The prosecutor leapt up, shouting, "Objection! This is outrageous." But the jury had already heard it. The seed was planted. And here's what makes this moment extraordinary. You don't need fireworks or yelling to capture an audience. Sometimes it takes just one sentence, delivered with conviction, to turn an entire trial upside down. Think about it, the smirk on the prosecutor's face, the gavel pounding from the bench, the lawyer's calm defiance. These are the moments people remember. These are the moments that go viral, replayed again and again because they reveal a truth deeper than the case at hand. This wasn't just courtroom theater. It was a reminder that when power tries to silence truth, truth often finds a louder voice. The judge, realizing control was slipping, leaned forward. His face was stern, his voice measured, but underneath there was something else, something like frustration. "Counselor, if you wish to continue, you will do so within the boundaries of this court." And the lawyer, without missing a beat, answered, "With respect, Your Honor, I intend to do exactly that. But those boundaries cannot exclude the truth." That line hit like a hammer, stronger than the judge's gavel, sharper than any objection. The gallery erupted once more. Reporters scribbled furiously, knowing they had just witnessed a headline in the making. The prosecutor was visibly rattled now. His smirk was gone. His hands shook as he shuffled his papers. He leaned toward his co-counsel, whispering frantically. But nothing could undo what had been said. And here's where it becomes clear. Power in the courtroom doesn't just come from the bench, or the statutes, or the rules. It comes from courage. The courage to speak when silence is expected. The courage to confront authority not with disrespect, but with conviction. This lawyer wasn't just defending his client anymore. He was defending the principle that the courtroom belongs to truth, not intimidation. And the people in that gallery? They felt it. They weren't just spectators, they were witnesses to a moment bigger than the trial itself. As the tension built, the judge called for a recess. His voice was steady, but it was clear to everyone he needed time. Time to regain control, time to recenter the trial, time to shake off the sting of being challenged so directly. The gavel slammed. "This court will recess for 15 minutes, the jury filed out, whispering among themselves. The gallery buzzed, the reporters rushed for the doors. Outside the courtroom, phones lit up. Tweets fired off, headlines were drafted. Judge interrupts defense attorney in explosive showdown. Lawyer defies judge, the truth cannot be silenced. The Clip would hit social media within minutes, replayed with captions, dissected frame by frame. And in living rooms, offices, and coffee shops across the country, people would watch, rewatch, and debate what had just unfolded. But here's the thing. The real drama wasn't what had already happened. It was what was coming next. Because when the court reconvened, the lawyer wasn't just ready to continue, he was ready to deliver a comeback so devastating, so undeniable that it would leave the entire courtroom speechless. And when he finally opened his mouth again, the judge, the prosecutor, and even the jury realized nothing would be the same. When the court reconvened, the air was different, heavier. The 15-minute recess hadn't cooled anything, it had stoked anticipation. The gallery whispered nervously, reporters leaned forward over their notebooks, and even the jurors, instructed not to discuss the case, returned with a subtle spark in their eyes. Everyone knew Act Two was about to begin. The judge entered, his robe flowing behind him like a shadow of authority. He took his seat and gavelled once. The sound echoed through the chamber, but this time it didn't silence the buzz. It only framed it. "All rise." The bailiff's command was followed by the ritual murmur of people shuffling to their feet. "Be seated." The defense attorney stood already, hands on the lectern, waiting. Calm, collected. The kind of calm that only comes from knowing exactly what you're about to do. The prosecutor glanced over, his jaw tight, his papers stacked higher than necessary, as if the tower of documents could intimidate his opponent. But towers can crumble. The judge cleared his throat. "Counsel, we will proceed. You are reminded to remain within the bounds of this court's authority." The defense attorney inclined his head, respectful, almost deferential. But then he spoke, and every word felt like it had been sharpened before being unleashed. "Thank you, Your Honor. With the court's permission, I will indeed proceed. And I will begin not with speculation, not with commentary, but with fact." The jury leaned forward. He had their attention again, and he knew it. The lawyer paused, picked up a folder, and held up a single document. "This," he said, "is an official record, unredacted, submitted months ago by the prosecution." And yet, mysteriously, when introduced before this jury, the relevant page was missing. Gasps. The gallery broke into whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously, one of them muttering, "Oh my God," under her breath. The prosecutor was on his feet in an instant. "Objection, Your Honor. This is completely misleading," but the lawyer cut him off. Not rudely, not shouting, just firmly, with the weight of confidence that silences all noise. "Objection? To what? To a document you yourself filed? To the truth that is staring us in the face?" The judge's gavel slammed. "Counsel!" "You will not interrupt each other. Mr. Defense, you will restrain yourself. And hear us the commentary you want to find in transcripts." Restraint was the last thing anyone wanted. The drama, the tension, the very heart of the trial, it was all wrapped in this moment. What the judge saw as chaos, the world outside saw as revelation. The defense attorney straightened, his voice steady but rising in intensity. "Your Honor, I respect this court. But I cannot, in good conscience, allow evidence to be buried in silence. This jury deserves to see the truth. And the truth is," he slapped the folder against the lectern, the sound like a gunshot in the room. "The prosecution has withheld information that could change everything." The jury's eyes widened. Heads turned. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. The prosecutor was red-faced, shouting now, "That is a lie. That is—" But the lawyer didn't even look at him. He looked straight at the jury, his voice low, measured, cutting. "Ladies and gentlemen, if telling the truth makes me disrespectful, then perhaps respect has been redefined." The silence that followed was deafening. No gavel, no objection, no shouting could erase it. And here's what's incredible. This was not just a comeback, it was a reversal. Think about it. The judge had interrupted him earlier. The prosecutor had tried to shut him down. The whole weight of authority had pressed against him. But here he was, not only standing his ground, but shifting the entire trial onto new terrain. This wasn't survival. This was attack. Calculated, relentless, unstoppable. And the people watching knew it. They weren't just hearing a lawyer defend his client. They were hearing someone call out a system that too often hides behind formality to dodge accountability. The judge exhaled slowly, trying to reel the moment back under control. Counselor, unless you can substantiate that claim immediately, this court will strike your words from the record. The defense attorney's reply was a masterstroke. Strike the words, Your Honor, if you must. But you cannot strike the truth. And the truth will remain long after this record is closed. The room froze. That was it. The mic drop moment. The one-liner that turned a courtroom exchange into a viral phenomenon. The gallery erupted, some gasping, some clapping before the bailiff barked for silence. Reporters practically leapt from their chairs. The prosecutor sat back down, visibly shaken, his smirk from earlier gone forever. And the jury? They weren't just listening anymore. They were captivated. The lawyer had become more than an advocate. He had become a storyteller, a truth-teller, a voice that pierced through the noise. And that's what makes this moment unforgettable. Authority tried to cut him off, but his words cut deeper. The judge warned him, but he turned the warning into a weapon. The prosecutor objected, but the objection only highlighted the power of what was being said. In trials like this, people expect drama, but what they don't expect is courage. And courage, when spoken aloud, can silence even the loudest gavel. The judge, visibly weary of the mounting chaos, finally ordered the jury out once more. We will take another recess. Jury dismissed, but the damage was done. No amount of recesses could erase what they had seen, what they had heard. The words had been spoken, and once spoken, they could not be unspoken. Outside, the gallery buzzed like a hive. Reporters rushed to file updates. Phones lit up again. Clips of the lawyer's truth cannot be struck line hit social media, replayed, memed, dissected. And here's the kicker. In the court of law, the judge may rule. But in the court of public opinion, the liar had just won the day. But this wasn't the end, not even close. Because the most shocking twist was still ahead. The judge, realizing his authority had been challenged in full view of the world, was about to make a decision so controversial, so unexpected, that it would send shockwaves far beyond the courtroom walls. And when it came, it would prove once and for all, sometimes, the biggest battles aren't about guilt or innocence, they're about power itself. The jury filed out again, the heavy wooden doors closing behind them with a dull thud. Inside, the air grew thick. The cameras, forbidden to roll inside the courtroom, had their substitutes, pens scribbling. Eyes wide, every breath documented by reporters who knew history was unfolding. The judge leaned back in his chair, visibly rattled. He had issued warnings, banged his gavel, tried to keep control, but the courtroom wasn't his anymore. The moment belonged to the defense attorney, and everyone knew it. And that is exactly what made what happened next so shocking. The judge's voice was clipped, tight. Mr. Defense, this court will not be made into a circus. Your comments risk undermining the very foundations of these proceedings. Accordingly, I am holding you in contempt. The words hit the room like an explosion. Contempt. A charge aimed not at criminals, not at liars, but at a lawyer who had dared to speak too boldly. Gasps rippled through the gallery. One woman in the back muttered, "Unbelievable." Reporters almost fell over each other as they scribbled. The prosecutor leaned back with a flicker of satisfaction returning to his face. For the first time all trial, the defense attorney was under fire. Or was he? Because instead of shrinking, instead of panicking, he did the unthinkable. He smiled, and then he spoke, calmly but with the kind of clarity that slices through every distraction. Your Honor, I understand your ruling. But let me remind this court of something. Contempt is not born from truth. Contempt is born from fear of it. The gallery erupted. The bailiff shouted for silence. The judge's gavel hammered like a drum of fury, but nothing could erase the words. And this right here is the heart of the story. Because in that instant, the courtroom wasn't about statutes or procedures. It was about power versus principle, authority versus truth. And when authority overreaches, history remembers not the robe, but the voice that dared to stand against it. The judge's face hardened. Mr. Defense, you are on dangerous ground. But the lawyer didn't flinch. He leaned forward, hands gripping the lectern. His voice dropped lower, quieter, forcing everyone to lean in. Your Honor, the danger lies not in what I say, but in what you silence. If my words can be struck, so be it. If I can be punished, so be it. But the evidence remains, the truth remains. And no ruling, no contempt order can erase it. The silence that followed wasn't ordinary silence. It was heavy, almost electric. The kind of silence that precedes thunder. The prosecutor tried to speak, but his voice faltered. The jury wasn't even in the room, yet the weight of public perception pressed down. The court of opinion had already delivered its verdict. Do you see it? This was no longer about one case, one client, one verdict. It was about something larger, the courage to stand tall when even the highest authority tries to cut you down. And courage, real courage always, leaves shockwaves. The judge finally relented, slamming his gavel. Enough, this matter will proceed as scheduled. Bailiff, remove the gallery if they cannot contain themselves. But it was too late. The gallery wasn't just watching, they were part of history. Whispers turned into text messages, which turned into tweets, which turned into viral headlines. Defense lawyer defies judge, contempt or courage. Courtroom clash goes viral. By the time the jury was brought back in, the outside world already knew. Social media flooded with clips of whispered retellings. Memes appeared within minutes, the lawyer's defiant line overlaid with captions like, "Fear the truth," or "Fear being exposed." Inside the courtroom, the defense attorney stood tall, calm as ever. He looked at the jury and gave a small nod as if to say, "You know what this is about?" The prosecutor fumbled through his next argument, his voice shaky, his confidence gone. Every word sounded hollow against the echo of what had just been said. The trial continued, but it didn't matter. The story had already escaped the walls of that room. And that's the irony, isn't it? Judges can control the record. They can order words stricken, they can issue rulings, they can hold lawyers in contempt, but they cannot control memory. They cannot control the human need for truth. And once truth is spoken, once courage lights, the fuse it spreads faster than any gavel can silence. When the day finally ended, reporters swarmed outside the courthouse. Microphones shoved forward, cameras rolling. The defense attorney simply raised one hand. No speech, no gloating. Just one sentence. "I will always choose truth over silence." That was it, and that was enough. The clip hit millions within hours. Hashtags trended. Commentators debated whether the judge had gone too far, whether the lawyer had crossed a line, whether this trial would ever recover. But beneath all the noise, one thing was clear. A single interruption had backfired, turning a routine day in court into a moment no one would forget. So what do we take away? That power, no matter how absolute it feels in the moment, always meets its limit. That truth, when spoken without fear, can shake even the tallest pillars of authority. And that sometimes the most shocking thing in a courtroom isn't a verdict, it is a voice refusing to be silenced. This wasn't just a clash between a judge and a lawyer. It was a clash between control and courage. And in the end, courage left the louder echo. And if you were stunned by what you just heard, you are not alone. Millions were. But here's the real question. What would you have done in that courtroom? Would you have stayed silent or spoken the truth no matter the cost? Tell us in the comments below. And do not forget, hit subscribe, share this story, and join us here every day as we uncover the moments that remind us. The powerful may interrupt, but the truth always finds its way back to the microphone.